In the vast expanse of the northern tundra, where the snow kissed the horizon and the silence was broken only by the occasional howl of the wind, there lived a pair of white foxes named Ira and Kale. Their den was tucked beneath an ancient pine, its roots curling protectively around their home. They were inseparable, their bond forged through years of survival in the harsh, unforgiving wilderness. One fateful morning, as the first light of dawn illuminated the icy world, Kyle ventured out to hunt. The frozen rivers and the dense snow made hunting more perilous than usual. Hours later, Era heard a faint, pained cry in the distance. Her heart clenched as she dashed out of the den, her paws barely touching the snow. Era found Kale lying limp near a jagged rock, a deep gash on his hind leg staining the snow crimson. His breaths were shallow, his eyes half closed. The sight of her mate in such a state shattered her, but she knew panic would not save him. Carefully, she nuzzled him, trying to reassure him with her presence. Kyle whispered weakly, I'll be fine, just rest. But Ira knew better. Without treatment, the wound could freeze, and infection could set in. She had heard from the elder foxes about a human settlement many kilometers away, a place where people might offer help to injured animals. Though foxes naturally feared humans, Ira had no choice. If she didn't seek help, Kale would not survive. The journey begins. The snowstorm that had been brewing finally descended as Era set out, her mind fixed on the distant human village. The wind howled fiercely, driving icy needles into her fur. Each step was a battle, her small frame pushed to its limits against nature's fury. As she trudged through the snow, memories of her life with Kale flooded her mind. She remembered how they had met as young foxes, playful and curious, chasing each other under the northern lights. Kyle had always been her strength, her warmth in the coldest winters. Now it was her turn to be strong for him. Ira's journey was fraught with challenges. The terrain was treacherous, with hidden ice patches and deep snowdrifts. Her sharp ears picked up the distant growl of a wolf pack, and her heart raced. She darted into a thicket, pressing herself against the ground as the wolves passed, their breath misting in the cold air. Hours turned into an eternity as she pushed forward, her paws raw and bleeding. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but there was no time to hunt. Every moment spent away from Kyle was a moment he might not survive. A glimmer of hope. Just as despair began to creep into her heart, Ira spotted a faint light in the distance. It flickered like a beacon, cutting through the white abyss. Summoning the last of her strength, she bounded toward it, her heart pounding with both fear and hope. The light led her to the human village, a cluster of wooden houses nestled against a hillside. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and the scent of cooked food wafted through the air. Era's instincts screamed at her to flee, but she stayed her ground. She crept closer, keeping to the shadows, her keen eyes scanning for someone who might help. Near one of the houses, a young woman stepped out, bundled in a thick coat. She carried a basket of firewood and seemed to hum softly to herself. Era hesitated, but then stepped into the open, her snowy fur blending almost seamlessly with the surroundings. She let out a small, plaintive bark, her ears flattened and her tail low in a gesture of submission. The woman froze, her eyes widening as she noticed the fox. Slowly, she knelt, placing the basket down. "What are you doing here, little one?" she murmured softly. Era barked again and turned, looking back toward the direction she had come from. She repeated the motion, trying to convey her urgency. The woman's brows furrowed. "Do you want me to follow you?" she asked, though she didn't expect an answer. Something about the fox's demeanor struck her as unusual. Grabbing a small medical kit from inside her house, she followed Ira into the storm, racing against time. The journey back to Kyle was no easier. Ira led the way, her pace frantic despite her exhaustion. The woman struggled to keep up, but her determination matched Era's. The storm raged on, but together they pressed forward. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the den. Era darted inside and barked softly at Kale, who barely lifted his head. The woman crouched at the entrance, her breath hitching at the sight of the injured fox. "Oh, you poor thing," she whispered, setting down her kit. With gentle hands, she cleaned Kyle's wound, applying an ointment to prevent infection and wrapping it in a makeshift bandage. All the while, Ira watched intently, her body tense but her eyes filled with gratitude. "He'll need rest," the woman said aloud, more to herself than to Era. "And food. I'll bring some back." The woman left briefly and returned with a small bundle of food, bits of cooked meat, and a bowl of warm water. Ira hesitated, but eventually took the food, nudging pieces toward Kale, who ate weakly. The bond strengthens. Over the next few days, the woman visited regularly, checking on Kale's wound and bringing food. She even built a small shelter near the den, providing additional warmth against the relentless cold. Slowly, Kale began to recover, his strength returning bit by bit. The bond between the woman and the foxes grew. Though Ira and Kyle remained wary, they began to trust her, sensing her genuine kindness. The woman, in turn, found solace in their companionship, the quiet resilience of the foxes inspiring her own strength. A grateful goodbye. When Kale was finally strong enough to stand and walk again, the woman knew it was time to say goodbye. She knelt by the den one last time, her eyes meeting Ira's. "You're remarkable creatures," she said softly. "Take care of each other." Era nuzzled the woman's hand, a rare display of affection. Kale dipped his head, his gratitude evident despite the language barrier. The woman watched as the pair disappeared into the snow, their white coats blending with the landscape. Back in their den, Kyle rested his head against Ira's, his eyes filled with love and admiration. "You saved me," he murmured. Ira licked his cheek, her heart swelling with relief and pride. And so the white foxes continued their lives in the tundra, their bond stronger than ever. Their tale became a legend among the animals of the north, a story of love, courage, and the extraordinary lengths one would go to for those they hold dear.